Hello and thanks for watching. I thought I'd introduce today's video from the churchyard of St John the Baptist's at Wolverley. I'm here in the hope that I might be able to find the grave of one James Wyre, little 4-year-old lad. Now, depending on whose story you believe, it may be an unmarked grave, or there may actually be still a grave marker here. Having had a quick look around, I'm not too optimistic of finding it, but I'll have a look around and see if we can find anything. I know it may only seem like a few seconds to you watching this video, but I have had a really good hunt around here. Poor little James, aged 4, would have had a pauper's funeral. At the time when he was initially interred, they weren't sure of his ID, so his coffin was actually marked up unknown child. You get various stories. Some people say that they excavated the grave again, reburied him later. There are other stories that somebody put a grave marker on there, but I've had a real good look around today, and I don't think there's much hope of finding it, to be honest. I've actually met and spoken with a few locals, and I've had a good look around all the areas where there are graves of the right period, but unfortunately I don't think poor James would have, well, he would have had a pauper's funeral, and I don't know that his grave is even marked, but somewhere in this churchyard lies the remains of poor old James Wyre, aged 4. Of course, it's also possible that there is a gravestone here that we simply can't read. There's so many of them from that period. Either the names are obscured by moss or have just completely worn away. So I think the chances of finding poor old James, his grave, is pretty remote, really. Right, so I'm going to move on now to a new location and continue the story for you. So rest in peace, little James, wherever you are. Back in 1888, James lived here at Bird's Barn Cottages. Looked very different back in 1888. It was actually 2 single-bedroomed cottages. But over the last 137 years, the cottages have been knocked through together, modified and greatly extended to make the sort of comfy family home that you see today. The current owner has no connection at all to the story. James lived with his father Thomas, his mother Harriet, and his 8-year-old half-sister Mary. Unfortunately, the marriage was falling apart and breaking down, and in fact on the 3rd of March 1888, Harriet announced that she was moving out and taking 8-year-old Mary with her. Thomas was to take charge of James. He decided or announced that he was going to take James to live with his parents, but in fact, sadly, that didn't actually happen. About a mile or so from the Wyres' home was Highwood Cottage, on land that I believe belonged to Castle Hill Farm, which you might remember from an earlier video. I'm pretty sure that this is all that remains now of Highwood Cottage, but this is where our story moves to next. On the 2nd of June 1888, a tree feller by the name of George Locke was working on Castle Hill Farm when he became thirsty. He went to the well at Highwood Cottage to draw some water to drink, but when he got there, he found that it had been covered by a stable door, some wood and an old boiler. Locke and his colleague Mr. Bishop uncovered the well, but when they looked into it, they saw a small body floating in the water. They reported this to the farm owner, the rather appropriately named Mr. Field. Starting to sound like a Bob Mortimer story now, isn't it? But anyway, they told Mr. Field, who in turn went to fetch the local police constable, P.C. Edwards. Between them, they were able to recover the body. The body was seriously decomposed, but some of the clothing remained intact. In fact, some reports suggested that it was his cap floating on the water that was the first thing that was spotted. His clothing was used to identify the body ultimately, and the post-mortem confirmed that the cause of death was drowning, and it was estimated to have been approximately 2 months earlier. Now, it was noted that Thomas Wyre had once lived at Highwood Cottage and therefore would have been aware of the well. It was the current occupant, Mr. James Davis, who had covered the well with the stable door, some bits of wood and an old boiler to prevent accidents. The body was only much later identified as being that of 4-year-old James Wyre. Based on what can only be described as circumstantial evidence, Thomas Wyre was arrested in Mamble near Tenbury Wells on the 4th of June and went to Worcester Assizes to stand trial. As I said, Wyre was arrested in Mamble near Tenbury Wells on the 4th of June 1888 and stood trial at Worcester Assizes on the 31st of June. There was no direct evidence against Wyre other than the circumstantial evidence, but he was convicted by Mr. Justice Denon and was sent to Worcester Jail. He later confessed his guilt to his solicitor. Turned out he actually had a significant criminal record dating back to 1874 and had previously served several spells of imprisonment. The gallows were set up in a treadwheel house in one of the prison yards, about 80 yards from the condemned cell. Wyre was hanged at 8 a.m. on Wednesday the 18th of July 1888 by James Berry. His death was recorded as instantaneous. At some point a death mask was made of Thomas Wyre, and this still exists today. It was rediscovered about 20 years ago in the basement of the Worcester Royal Infirmary building, along with several others. They are now on display in the George Marshall Medical Museum at Worcester Royal Hospital. These objects were believed to have been used by Victorian medics studying phrenology, a sort of pseudo-science involving the measurement of bumps in people's skulls to judge their human traits. During my research, several people told me that Thomas Wyre was the last person to be hung at Worcester Jail, but in fact there were actually 8 more, Jang Ding Sung being the last one on the 3rd of December 1919. I'll put a list of them all in the description below actually. So that's it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I just wanted to say thanks to Andy Parks and Charge Hand for making me aware of this story, and also to Adrian Robbins and Andy Cox for helping with the research and the locations, and also to Sarah for helping to transport me around. Now, if you've liked the video, please don't forget to leave me a like, leave a comment in the comment section, and of course, ultimately, if you can, please subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Cheers for now.